moving on to the next topic, I want to ask you, what sort of trends that you're seeing in the employee experience space this year, and now obviously looking across to 2023. But I'd just like to ask you, when you talk about trusted race, for me, I'm seeing a lot personally in the space of everybody's really revisiting their kind of EVP at the moment. And looking at that and how do we reposition that, and how do we look at that? Would you say that is a trend at the moment? And what are some of the other things that you're seeing from your side?
I think and maybe let me start off a bit with the EVP piece. From an EVP perspective, there's a recognition that some of the things that we previously valued, so we spoke a lot about the salaries and the benefits that you would receive when you worked for us, and maybe the development and the things we would do for you. I think what the past couple of years have shown us is that it's so much more than that. And the reason why people get up every day and come to work is no longer just salary. It's no longer just benefits. It's no longer that you pay for my studies, but people want have purpose, right? And want the why, and how does this add value to my life, right? And I think at the core of it for me is purpose in organizations. And one of the trends we are seeing is the need for people are talking a lot more about purpose, organizations revising their purpose. And I think being a little bit more deliberate around what their purpose is and clarifying that for their employees. So I think a piece of work that many organizations either have started, are thinking about, and a trend that I'm noticing is around linking organizational purpose to personal purpose. And where there's incongruence, what you typically have is either tension or friction, which shows up in various ways, in things that are happening in the operations of the business. So how we execute, in retention numbers and retention numbers and the number of people that choose to stay with you and choose to leave you. I think you see it in terms of satisfaction surveys, culture surveys, engagement surveys, EX surveys, where organizations are running those, and employees are telling you around what their why is and how different that is to what, for example, organizations will have on their websites as their purpose. So I think a big trend for me is really the amplification around organizational purpose and the alignment of that to one's personal values. And I think one's personal values as well as purpose. So purpose for me overall, one of the big things I think we're seeing. I think the second one that has been has been elevated in the past 2 years because of the pandemic has been the concept of well-being, and well-being becoming a new employee metric.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, we've had various degrees of EAPs and kind of the things that they offered, which were either physical, linked to physical health, or mental well-being to some extent, financial well-being to some extent. And what you're starting to see is employees wanting that holistic whole person focus, a zoom in on the mental health piece. And what I've also started to see is kind of a spring up of various suppliers who are really choosing to focus on the mental health piece. And I think the pandemic kind of accelerated that, but we are seeing some of the things we get asked in interviews and you are seeing is people asking, do you have an EAP and what does it cover, right?
Yeah.
Because people want more than the ability to pick up the phone during a time of trauma. I want the ability to talk to someone, whether it is trauma, whether it's any day during the week, and I feel the need to talk about something that's bothering me, or I want to unpack something, or I'm dealing with something in my family. It shouldn't just be linked to trauma. It's broader than that. I'm a whole person, and show up for me in that way. And whether that's mental health, and whether it's physical or it's financial, step in as an organization and see me as a whole person who has various needs across the spectrum, and see how you provide that for me. And I think for me, the well-being piece is a second trend. I think moving on to I'll probably talk to 2 or 3 more. The role of line managers in the organization is changing. And it's linked to the fourth trend, which is around flexible work and hybrid work. And I think what we are seeing is organizations shift to a hybrid model where you have some remote work and some face-to-face time. And what is changing for line managers is their ability to elevate. They need to elevate their role. Their roles become elevated in building employee experience, because one of the arguments is that in a remote world, organizations lose their culture because you don't engage with their artifacts. You don't engage with some of the cultural elements you typically would coming into the office 5 days a week. So what this therefore means for line managers is really they have to step up from it, giving that employee that experience. How do they build the culture such that even if I'm at home 3 times a week or 4 times a week, I still know what the organization I work for stands for, how things are done around in that specific place, and I completely get the culture and have an opportunity to test if I'm aligned to that culture. So really building that connection to culture, and I think it takes a certain set of skills for line managers to be able to do that. So I think the role of a line manager, where typically someone would come into an organization, you have induction for whatever number of days, you get to engage with the business daily, and that's how you learn. The way in which employees are having to learn the environments and assimilate to environments is becoming a little bit tricky. And I think the line manager, as well as technology, certainly have a bigger role to play in making that experience a bit more seamless, so that so that people that have started either in a hybrid world or when in a 5-day work world have the same experience, speak to the culture the same, experience the culture the same, and pretty much have a similar narrative around this is the culture of where I work, and it is similar. So I think line managers also, I think their role becomes elevated. And I think there's a bit of work for us to do around there. And I think it's going to get bigger over time.
Yeah.
I think maybe the last one to touch on is around flexible and hybrid work, where I do think, whilst I mean some research talks to, and I do some work with Gartner, but they talk to Gen Zs wanting that in-person time. But in that in-person time, give me the right experiences. So what that does is creates the need for organizations to kind of have the hybrid work, in the sense that when you do have face time, be deliberate around what you do in that time. How do we drive collaboration? How do you drive some of the cultural elements? And I think how organizations think about integration of various generations, integration of various kind of life stages that employees are going through, becomes different and is shifting over time. And I think there is a need for more flexibility. There is a home for the hybrid world. And I mean, in some spaces, remote might work. It's not to say that it's gone forever, but I think we do need to think about how do you, in someone's experience where we are all in our 10, 15, 2,000 different homes, experiencing things very differently. How do you create an experience that stays true to the culture, that is superior, that gives employees that sense of belonging, inclusive, makes employees feel like they have been included in the organization. So I mean, I think I'll talk to those. I could go on.